15. Gospel stars who lost their careers to devastating diseases. What if I told you some of the greatest gospel voices icons who filled stadiums, inspired nations, and brought millions to tears were forced to walk away from the spotlight? Not by choice, but by incurable diseases that slowly silenced their songs. These were legends who gave everything to their faith and music. Yet behind the applause, they faced battles the world rarely saw. Before we reveal the heartbreaking truths about these gospel giants, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, do we truly celebrate our heroes enough before they're gone? Andraé Crouch. Andraé Edward Crouch. Born on July 1, 1942 in Los Angeles, California, grew up in a home where faith and music were inseparable. His father was a pastor. His mother managed the family's small businesses, and it was within this environment that Andraé's musical gift began to bloom. As a child, he battled a stutter, but he discovered he could sing words more easily than he could speak them. That simple realization changed the trajectory of his life forever. By his teenage years, Crouch had composed "The Blood Will Never Lose Its Power," a song that would become one of the most beloved gospel anthems of the 20th century. In 1965, he formed The Disciples, a group that quickly gained national attention through albums like Take the Message Everywhere and Keep on Singin'. What made Crouch stand out was his fearless approach to blending gospel with R&B, jazz, and pop elements, and innovation that brought fresh energy to sacred music without stripping away its spiritual core. During the 1970s and 1980s, Crouch's influence reached beyond the church walls. He worked with global icons such as Michael Jackson and Madonna, contributed to major film scores including The Lion King and The Color Purple, and earned 7 Grammy Awards along the way. In 1998, he was inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, and in 2004 he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a rare honor for a gospel artist. But behind the achievements was a man fighting a private battle. Andraé Crouch lived with diabetes, congestive heart failure, and recurring bouts of pneumonia that worsened over time. By late 2014, his health had declined so severely that he was forced to cancel performances and touring plans. On January 8, 2015, Andraé Crouch passed away at the age of 72, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape gospel music worldwide. Even now, his timeless songs like Soon and Very Soon, My Tribute to God Be the Glory, and Through It All are sung in churches across the globe, reminding listeners of faith, hope, and resilience. Andraé Crouch was more than a musician. He was a pioneer who proved that gospel could evolve, embrace modern sounds, and still speak to the soul. Though illness ended his earthly journey, his music continues to inspire generations, a living testament to a man whose voice and vision could not be silenced. Albertina Walker. Albertina Walker, born on August 29, 1929 in Chicago, Illinois, grew up in a world where music was both faith and freedom. From a young age, she possessed a voice that could cut through pain, lift broken spirits, and transform ordinary church services into unforgettable moments of praise. People called her the Queen of Gospel, and she carried that title with grace, power, and humility. In 1951, she founded the Caravanza group that would forever change the course of gospel music. Under her leadership, this all-female ensemble launched the careers of future legends like Shirley Caesar, Dorothy Norwood, and Inez Andrews. Together, they brought gospel to new heights, performing songs that became the heartbeat of Black churches across America. But Albertina wasn't just a group leader. Over a career spanning more than 6 decades, she recorded over 60 albums, many of them becoming gospel classics. Songs like Please Be Patient With Me and Lord Keep Me, Day by Day, carried messages of hope and endurance that resonated far beyond Sunday mornings. Her powerful performances earned her a Grammy Award, multiple Stellar Awards, and eventually a place in the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. Yet behind the standing ovations and gold records, Albertina fought a battle few knew about. In the early 2000s, she was diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and emphysema conditions that slowly stole her breath and drained her strength. Even as doctors warned her to rest, she refused to stop singing. Friends recalled how she sometimes performed with an oxygen tank nearby her body, struggling, but her spirit unshaken. Albertina did. Instead of retreating from the spotlight, she used her voice to raise awareness about lung disease in African American communities, turning her personal struggle into a mission to help others. Through the Albertina Walker Scholarship Foundation, she supported young gospel artists, ensuring that financial hardship or health challenges would never silence future generations of singers. In 2010, on her 81st birthday, she was rushed to the hospital with severe respiratory complications. Doctors performed a tracheostomy to help her breathe, but her health continued to decline. Yet even then, she remained committed to her ministry, making one final major appearance at the Chicago Gospel Music Festival that same year. On October 8, 2010, Albertina Walker passed away, leaving behind a legacy that transcends music. She was a pioneer who elevated gospel to global stages, a mentor who nurtured future legends, and a woman of faith who never let illness silence her praise. When choirs sing her songs in churches across the world, Albertina Walker's voice lives on a reminder that faith and courage can outlast even the harshest storms. Walter Hawkins. Walter Lee Hawkins, born on May 18, 1949 in Oakland, California, grew up surrounded by music and faith. The younger brother of gospel legend Edwin Hawkins, Walter, was destined to carry the torch, but soon proved he was more than a shadow of anyone's legacy. From the moment he stepped into the world of gospel, his smooth baritone voice and natural gift for songwriting made him one of the most distinctive and beloved artists in the genre. In 1968, Walter first gained attention as part of the Edwin Hawkins Singers, the group that shook the world with the groundbreaking hit, "Oh, Happy Day." But Walter wanted to carve his own path. By the early 1970s, he founded the Love Center Church in Oakland, a ministry that combined powerful preaching with extraordinary music. Out of this ministry came the iconic Love Alive album series projects that changed gospel music forever. The Love Alive series became legendary with Love Alive 2, selling over 1 million copies in 1978, a remarkable achievement for any gospel recording. Songs like Be Grateful, Marvelous, and Thank You became anthems in churches nationwide, celebrated for their heartfelt lyrics and unforgettable melodies. Over the years, Walter recorded more than a dozen albums, earned Stellar Awards, Dove Awards, and even a Grammy, all while pastoring a thriving congregation. But behind the success was a private battle that few knew about. In 2008, Walter was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest forms of the disease with survival rates under 10%. Even as his health declined, he refused to let illness silence his calling. Friends recalled how after grueling chemotherapy treatments, he would still show up at choir rehearsals or church services, pouring what little strength he had left into his ministry. Walter did. He even reunited with his siblings for the Hawkins Family Reunion Tour in 2009, giving fans one final glimpse of his brilliance. During this period, he also raised awareness about cancer in the African American community, encouraging early screenings and better healthcare access. On July 11, 2010, Walter Hawkins passed away at just 61 years old. His funeral drew thousands of mourners, church leaders, gospel stars, and everyday people whose lives had been touched by his voice and ministry. Tributes poured in from across the nation, celebrating not just the artist, but the man who turned his pain into a platform for faith and hope. Walter Hawkins left behind a legacy that transcends music. His Love Alive series still inspires choirs around the world, and his songs remain fixtures in worship services everywhere. Though illness claimed his body, it could never silence the message of faith and perseverance he carried until his very last breath. Rance Allen. Rance Allen, born on November 19, 1948 in Monroe, Michigan, grew up in a home where church wasn't just a place to worship. It was the heartbeat of the entire community. From his earliest days, it was clear that young Rance possessed a rare gift. His voice carried a range and power that made listeners stop in their tracks, soaring from deep baritone notes to high falsetto runs with a freedom few could match. In 1969, alongside his brothers Thomas and Steve, he formed the Rance Allen Group. At a time when gospel music often stayed close to its traditional roots, Rance dared to push boundaries. He blended gospel with soul R&B and even rock influences, creating a sound that was modern, fresh, and unapologetically bold. The group's 1979 breakthrough hit, I Belong to You, became a crossover success, proving that gospel music could hold its own on both sacred and secular stages. But it wasn't just the music style that made Rance Allen a legend. It was the fire in his delivery. Whether on stage or in church, his performances were electrifying. He became known as the father of contemporary gospel, a title earned through decades of innovation that paved the way for artists like Kirk Franklin and Marvin Sapp. Over the years, the Rance Allen Group released more than 20 albums, earned multiple Stellar Awards, and received Grammy nominations, cementing their place in gospel history. Offstage, Rance embraced a second calling as a pastor. In 1985, he became the founding pastor of New Bethel Church of God in Christ in Toledo, Ohio, a position he would hold for over 30 years. Balancing the pulpit and the stage, he ministered through both sermons and songs, impacting lives far beyond music charts or church walls. However, in his later years, Rance faced significant health challenges. He battled heart disease and kidney failure, enduring exhausting dialysis treatments while continuing to record and perform. Rance Allen did. Even as illness wore down his body, his voice never lost its fire. In 2020, while still undergoing treatment, he recorded his final project, God Has Been So Good. Fans were amazed to hear that same passionate delivery, proof that his gift remained untouchable to the very end. On October 31, 2020, Rance Allen passed away at age 71 from complications following a medical procedure. The gospel world mourned deeply as tributes poured in from legends like Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, and CeCe Winans, all crediting him as a pioneer who transformed the sound and scope of gospel music. Though illness ended his earthly journey, Rance Allen's legacy lives on. His powerful voice, fearless creativity, and trailblazing spirit continue to echo through churches, choirs, and hearts around the world, an eternal reminder that faith-filled music can break barriers and transcend generations. Mandisa Lynn Hundley was born October 2, 1976, in Citrus Heights, California. From early on, she felt drawn to music and faith. After studying vocal jazz, and then earning a degree in vocal performance, she joined Fisk University's esteemed Jubilee Singers. Her breakthrough came in 2005 when she auditioned for American Idol Season 5 and advanced into the top 9, using that exposure as a launchpad for her gospel/contemporary Christian music career. Over the next years, Mandisa released albums that resonated deeply with people facing struggle. True Beauty, Freedom, What If We Were Real, and most notably, Overcomer. The title track and its parent album earned her a Grammy win in 2014 for Best Contemporary Christian Music Album. Her music spoke of redemption, strength, and perseverance through hardship. Behind the artistry, Mandisa carried heavy burdens. She openly grappled with depression, anxiety, and self-worth issues, especially after losing a close friend and mentor to breast cancer in 2014. That grief shook her faith and led to isolation and self-medication with food. She revealed that at one point she regained significant weight after having lost it and suffered dark thoughts of suicide. Friends intervened, urging counseling and community support, which gradually helped bring her back from the brink. She wrote a memoir, Out of the Dark, My Journey Through the Shadows to Find God's Joy, describing how she battled inner storms even as she sang to uplift others. In April 2024, Mandisa was found dead in her home in Franklin, Tennessee, at age 47. An autopsy later attributed her death to complications from Class 3 obesity, and the manner of death was ruled natural. She was reportedly last seen alive about 3 weeks before being found. Her weight had reached levels considered in the highest obesity classification, which carries severe health risks and contributes to comorbidities. Mandisa's passing left many in shock not only because of her vibrant voice, but because of how candidly she had shared her own vulnerabilities. Her songs like Stronger Good Morning and Unfinished continue inspiring those wrestling with inner darkness. Her life reminds us that battling a disease, whether mental or physical, is a journey, and that even in our weakest hours, a voice of hope can still rise. Though her time was cut short, Mandisa's legacy endures in every choir that sings Overcomer and in every believer who hears her story and dares to hope again. Mattie Moss Clark. Mattie Juliette Moss. Clark, born on March 26, 1925 in Selma, Alabama, was destined to transform gospel music forever. Growing up in the church, she developed a passion for both music and ministry early on, showing not only vocal talent, but also a sharp ear for harmonies and arrangements. By the time she moved to Detroit, Michigan in the 1940s, she had already built a reputation as a gifted musician with an uncompromising commitment to excellence in worship. Mattie served as the minister of music for the Church of God in Christ Kojic, one of the largest Pentecostal denominations in the world. It was there she introduced the three-part harmony structure for gospel choirs, soprano, alto, and tenor, a technique that revolutionized church music. Before her, most choirs sang in unison, or simple two-part harmony. After her, innovation gospel choirs across America began producing a fuller, richer sound that carried both technical sophistication and spiritual power. But Mattie Moss Clark was more than a director. She was a mentor, teacher, and builder of legacies. She trained countless choir directors and musicians, instilling discipline and dedication at a level rarely seen in church music at the time. Her workshops drew people from across the nation, eager to learn from the woman whose name had become synonymous with gospel excellence. Her own family became a gospel dynasty. Mattie was the mother of the legendary Clark sisters, Jackie Twinkie Dorinda, and Karen, who carried her teachings to international stages. Under her influence, they became one of the most successful gospel groups in history, blending tight harmonies with powerful ministry in a way that continues to inspire generations. In the early 1980s, Mattie was diagnosed with diabetes, a condition that led to severe complications, including the amputation of one leg. Yet even from a wheelchair, she continued directing choirs, hosting music workshops, and mentoring young musicians. Her determination showed that while disease could weaken the body, it could never break the spirit of someone devoted to her calling. Despite her declining health, she recorded landmark projects like Mattie Moss. Clark presents the Clark Sisters in 1982, a testament to her relentless passion for music ministry. Those who knew her said she demanded excellence because she believed gospel music was a divine offering, one that deserved nothing less than perfection. On September 22, 1994, Mattie Moss Clark passed away at the age of 69. Her funeral in Detroit drew thousands, including gospel luminaries, church leaders, and musicians whose lives she had impacted. Mattie left more than songs and choirs. She left a blueprint for gospel music itself. Every time a choir sings in three-part harmony, every time a director insists on both precision and passion, they honor the legacy of the woman who turned church music into a powerful, enduring art form. Inez Andrews. Inez Andrews, born on April 14, 1929 in Birmingham, Alabama, rose from humble beginnings to become one of gospel music's most unforgettable voices. Known as the High Priestess of Gospel, she possessed a soaring soprano that could reach impossible heights, yet carry deep emotion with every note. When she sang, it wasn't just a performance, it was a spiritual encounter. Her journey began in the 1950s when she joined the Caravans, one of the most influential gospel groups of the era. Alongside Albertina Walker, Shirley Caesar, and Dorothy Norwood, Inez helped shape the golden age of female gospel ensembles. But it was her signature song, Lord, Don't Move the Mountain, that cemented her legacy. The track became an anthem across churches, calling on believers to face life's challenges with courage, rather than asking for obstacles to be removed. In the decades that followed, Inez launched a successful solo career recording albums that resonated with audiences across America and beyond. Her voice carried raw power but also tender vulnerability, capturing both the struggles and the triumphs of faith. She performed on stages around the world, won multiple awards, and in 2002 was inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, a fitting tribute to a woman whose music had inspired generations. But even gospel giants are not immune to life's hardships. As the years passed, Inez battled health complications that increasingly slowed her down. The demands of touring became harder to manage, and she performed less frequently. Still, when she did take the stage, even in her later years, audiences said her voice retained the same fire and conviction it had decades before. Inez did. Friends recalled how even while fighting illness, she remained dedicated to mentoring younger singers and sharing her wisdom with rising gospel talents. In 2012, just months before her death, she performed at the Chicago Gospel Music Festival. Those in the audience, sensing it might be one of her final appearances, responded with a standing ovation, honoring not only her music, but also her unwavering devotion. On December 19, 2012, Inez Andrews passed away at the age of 83. Tributes poured in from gospel legends like Shirley Caesar, who called her a giant among us. Choirs across the country lifted her songs in remembrance, celebrating the woman who had given so much of herself to the music and the message she loved. Her legacy lives on in every gospel singer who dares to reach for the high notes both musically and spiritually. Inez Andrews showed the world that even when illness comes, faith and courage can make a voice echo far beyond the limits of time and health. Dorothy Norwood. Dorothy Norwood, born on May 29, 1935 in Atlanta, Georgia, became known to the world as the world's greatest gospel storyteller. Her songs didn't just entertain. They carried the raw weight of real life, turning pain, struggle, and triumph into living parables wrapped in music. From her earliest years, Dorothy possessed a contralto voice so rich and commanding that it seemed destined to carry messages of faith and perseverance. Her professional career began when she joined the Caravans, one of the most iconic female gospel groups in history. Alongside legends like Albertina Walker, Shirley Caesar, and Inez Andrews, Dorothy helped bring gospel to new heights in the 1950s and 1960s. But while others were known for soaring vocals or electrifying performances, Dorothy carved her unique space as a storyteller. Songs like The Denied Mother and Victory Is Mine weren't just music, they were narratives of faith overcoming impossible odds. In 1964, Dorothy launched her solo career with the album Johnny and Jesus, which sold over 500,000 copies, a rare feat for gospel at the time. The record cemented her reputation as an artist who could connect with listeners on a deeply personal level. She went on to release more than 40 albums, many of them topping gospel charts and earning her multiple Stellar and Dove Award nominations. But behind the accolades, Dorothy carried her share of struggles. As the years passed, the demanding schedule of constant touring, sometimes performing over 200 nights a year, took a toll on her health. Friends and colleagues noted how the road life left little time for rest or recovery. Yet Dorothy rarely slowed down. Even as age and illness crept in, she continued to sing, record, and mentor younger artists, refusing to let physical limitations dim her calling. Dorothy did. In her later years, she received numerous lifetime achievement honors, including recognition from the Rhythm of Gospel Awards in 2021, celebrating more than 6 decades of ministry through music. Even as her health declined, she used her platform to inspire others, proving that gospel music was not just about melody and harmony, but also about courage, resilience, and faith under fire. On March 17, 2022, Dorothy Norwood passed away at the age of 86. Her funeral drew generations of gospel artists, church leaders, and fans who came not just to mourn her loss, but to celebrate a life poured out in song and story. Tributes recalled how her music had comforted the grieving, strengthened the weary, and lifted countless hearts toward hope. Dorothy Norwood's legacy endures in every choir that sings "Victory is Mine," and in every artist who dares to tell real stories through gospel music. Her voice may be silent, but her message of faith through struggle still rings loud and clear. Milton Brunson. Reverend Milton R. Brunson, born on June 28, 1929 in Chicago, Illinois, grew up at a time when gospel music was beginning to find its place on national stages. As a young man, Brunson felt a deep calling not only to preach the gospel, but also to express it through music. He studied under Thomas A. Dorsey, the father of gospel music, and Mahalia Jackson, the legendary gospel singer. Those experiences shaped him into a leader who combined faith, music, and ministry in ways that transformed lives. In 1948, at just 18 years old, Brunson founded the Thompson Community Singers, affectionately known as the Tommies. What began as a small church choir soon became one of the most influential gospel ensembles in history. Under his direction, the Tommies introduced a polished, powerful sound that set new standards for gospel choirs nationwide. With songs like "Safe in His Arms," "I'm Available to You," and "He's Still Good." The group's music carried messages of hope, faith, and endurance that reached beyond church walls. By the 1960s and 70s, Reverend Brunson had become a towering figure in gospel music. He released more than 20 albums, many of them topping gospel charts and earning national recognition. His choir won numerous awards, including Stellar Awards and a Grammy for the album Through God's Eyes in 1995. But Brunson never saw music as separate from ministry. For him, every note sung was part of a larger mission to share the gospel and uplift communities in need. Behind the scenes, however, Brunson faced growing health challenges. As the years passed, he battled heart disease, a condition that increasingly limited his physical strength but never seemed to slow his dedication. Friends and choir members recalled how even when visibly tired, he would gather enough energy to lead rehearsals or direct performances with the same passion he had in his youth. Reverend Brunson did. His commitment inspired countless choir directors and gospel artists who looked to him as a mentor and spiritual father. Under his leadership, the Tommies became a training ground for future gospel greats, many of whom went on to have successful careers while carrying forward the excellence and discipline he instilled. On January 22, 1997, Reverend Milton Brunson passed away at the age of 67, just as the Tommies were preparing to celebrate their 50th anniversary. His funeral in Chicago drew thousands of musicians, church leaders, and admirers from across the country, gathering to honor a man whose music and ministry had touched so many lives. Even after his passing, the Tommies continued performing, keeping his legacy alive. Reverend Milton Brunson left behind more than songs. He left a blueprint for how gospel music could be both spiritually powerful and musically brilliant, a standard that still influences choirs around the world today. Jesse Dixon. Jesse Dixon, born on March 12, 1938 in San Antonio, Texas, became one of the most dynamic and versatile voices in gospel music. From a young age, he was drawn to both the piano and the power of song, discovering that music could reach hearts in ways words alone never could. By the 1960s, Jesse's talent caught the attention of gospel legend James Cleveland, who quickly recognized the young man's potential. Dixon launched his career with passion and purpose, recording songs that combined deep spiritual conviction with musical sophistication. Over the next 5 decades, he released more than 20 albums and penned hundreds of songs, including classics like I Am Redeemed and God Can Do Anything But Fail. His rich baritone voice and expressive stage presence brought audiences to their feet time and again, whether he was performing in small churches or on global stages. In the 1980s, Jesse Dixon gained international fame when he joined Paul Simon on the Graceland Tour, performing before thousands of people worldwide. This groundbreaking collaboration introduced gospel music to audiences who had never experienced it live, proving that the genre could cross cultural and musical boundaries without losing its spiritual core. Despite his success, Jesse Dixon faced profound health challenges in his later years. He battled cancer, a disease that gradually weakened his body, but never diminished his spirit. Even when treatments left him exhausted, he continued mentoring younger artists, teaching them not only about music, but also about faith, perseverance, and humility. Jesse did. In his final recordings, listeners could hear a new depth in his voice, an intimacy that only comes from someone who has walked through suffering with faith intact. On September 26, 2011, Jesse Dixon passed away at the age of 73. Tributes poured in from gospel legends and secular artists alike, celebrating a man who had dedicated his life to sharing God's message through music. His funeral overflowed with people whose lives had been touched by his songs, his mentorship, and his unwavering belief that music could heal the soul. Today, choirs and soloists around the world still sing his compositions, carrying forward his legacy of hope, worship, and excellence. Jesse Dixon showed that while illness might slow the body, it could never silence a voice committed to praising God until the very end. Darrell Coley. Darrell Coley, born on October 30th, 1955 in Berkeley, California, emerged as one of gospel music's most gifted vocalists. Known for his extraordinary range and soulful delivery, Darrell had the rare ability to move effortlessly from smooth tenor lines to soaring high notes that sent chills through audiences. As a child, he lost sight in one eye, but rather than letting this setback define him, he found comfort and purpose in music, teaching himself piano and singing in church choirs. By his teenage years, Darrell was leading choirs and astonishing listeners with his vocal control and emotional depth. His big break came when he joined the Edwin Hawkins Singers, the group famous for "Oh Happy Day." In 1986, he released his debut album, Just Darrell, blending gospel jazz and contemporary influences into a sound that felt both timeless and fresh. Songs like He's Preparing Me and I Can't Tell It All became instant classics, showcasing not just his vocal talent, but also his gift for ministry through music. Behind the scenes, however, Darrell faced a lifelong struggle with juvenile diabetes, a condition that led to kidney failure and other serious complications. Friends recalled how even during dialysis treatments and hospital stays, he would tell them, "The ministry must go on." His health battles forced him to slow down, but he never stopped recording, mentoring, or serving as pastor of Love Fellowship Tabernacle. Darrell did. Even in his later years, as his body grew weaker, his spirit seemed to grow stronger. He continued mentoring young artists, reminding them that gospel music was about touching lives, not seeking applause. On March 15, 2016, at the age of 60, Darrell Coley passed away, leaving the gospel world in mourning. Tributes came from Yolanda Adams, Donnie McClurkin, and countless others who called him one of the greatest voices in gospel history. Darrell Coley's legacy lives on in the songs he recorded, the artists he inspired, and the believers who still find strength in his music. His life proved that while disease can take the body, it cannot steal the power of a voice surrendered to faith and purpose. Thomas Whitfield. Thomas Anthony Whitfield, born on November 30th, 1954 in Detroit, Michigan, became one of gospel music's most gifted composers, arrangers, and producers. Known as the Maestro, he brought a level of musical sophistication to gospel that few had ever imagined possible. From his earliest years, Thomas displayed an almost otherworldly ear for harmony, structure, and emotion. By the time he was a teenager, he was already directing choirs and crafting arrangements that blended the power of church music with the finesse of classical and jazz traditions. Whitfield attended the Detroit Conservatory of Music, where he sharpened his skills as a pianist and composer. In the 1970s, he founded the Thomas Whitfield Company, a group that became known for its intricate harmonies and moving performances. Under his leadership, gospel choirs began to embrace complex chord progressions, innovative vocal arrangements, and lush instrumentation without losing the raw spiritual energy at the heart of the genre. Songs like We Need a Word from the Lord, I Shall Wear a Crown, and Hallelujah anyhow became timeless standards covered by choirs across the country. His approach to gospel was daring yet deeply reverent, bringing a fresh sound that appealed to both traditionalists and younger audiences. He worked with gospel greats like Vanessa Bell Armstrong and the Clark Sisters, shaping albums that pushed the boundaries of what gospel music could be. But behind the brilliance was a man carrying an invisible burden. On June 20th, 1992, at just 37 years old, Thomas Whitfield suffered a massive heart attack while working in his Detroit studio. Those close to him said there were few warnings, no long decline, just the sudden loss of a genius whose influence was only beginning to unfold. What would gospel music sound like today if Thomas Whitfield had been given more time? That question still echoes among musicians who studied his work, many of whom credit Whitfield with inspiring an entire generation of choir directors, arrangers, and soloists. His passing sent shockwaves through the gospel community. At the time of his death, he was preparing for an upcoming concert and working on new music, proof that his creativity never slowed down, despite the pressures of the industry. In the years since his passing, Thomas Whitfield's influence has only grown. Modern gospel artists often cite him as a pioneer who proved that gospel music could be both theologically rich and musically daring. His arrangements are still studied in music schools, and his songs remain staples in church choirs across America. Thomas Whitfield's life may have been brief, but his impact was monumental. He redefined gospel composition, elevated choir music to new heights, and left behind a legacy of excellence that continues to inspire worshipers, musicians, and dreamers everywhere. Though a heart attack ended his journey too soon, his music ensures that the maestro still conducts from beyond the veil. James Moore. Reverend James Moore, born on February 1, 1956 in Detroit, Michigan, was a man whose voice carried both thunderous power and tender intimacy. From his earliest years, it was clear that music was not just a gift for James, it was a calling. By the time he was in his 20s, Moore had already become known for a vocal style that could bring a congregation to its feet one moment and move them to tears the next. His breakthrough came in the early 1980s with albums like Live at Jackson State University 1982 and I Will Trust in the Lord 1983. Songs such as Jesus Will Fix It and I Don't Mind Waiting revealed a singer who didn't just perform notes, he lived them. Listeners said his voice carried the weight of Scripture itself, a mix of conviction and compassion that made every lyric feel deeply personal. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Moore became one of gospel music's most celebrated artists. He toured extensively, recorded multiple hit albums, and won stellar awards for his contributions to the genre. But behind the scenes, life was quietly preparing its hardest test. In the late 1990s, James Moore was diagnosed with cancer, a battle that began to drain the physical strength he once poured into every performance. Even as treatments left him weak, Moore refused to stop singing. In his later albums, fans noticed a raw vulnerability in his voice, a man singing on borrowed time, every lyric infused with urgency, faith, and surrender. James Moore did. He continued performing, often seated during concerts, when his strength no longer allowed him to stand for long periods. Yet even from a chair, his voice carried the same power it always had, proof that faith can sustain the spirit even when the body struggles. On March 3, 2000, Reverend James Moore passed away at the age of 44. His death sent shockwaves through the gospel community. Tributes poured in from across the nation, not only from fellow artists, but from ordinary people whose lives had been touched by his ministry. Many recalled how his songs had carried them through grief, illness, and loss, offering comfort when words alone could not. At his funeral, choirs and soloists joined together to sing the very songs he had made famous, turning mourning into a celebration of a life dedicated to faith and music. James Moore's legacy lives on in churches worldwide, where his recordings still inspire hope in those facing their own battles. His life reminds us that while disease may silence the body, it can never silence the faith of a man who sang to glorify God until his very last breath. Myrna Summers. Myrna Summers, born on March 30, 1949 in Washington, D.C., grew up surrounded by faith, family, and music. From the beginning, it was clear she had a gift that would one day move millions. By the age of 12, she was already leading songs in her local church, her voice carrying a power far beyond her years. She studied music formally, refining the vocal talent that would make her one of gospel music's most enduring artists. Her breakthrough came in 1970 with the release of God Gave Me a Song. The title track became a gospel standard sung in churches across the country, marking Myrna as a rising star with a voice full of both strength and compassion. In 1979, she followed with We're Gonna Make It, another landmark album that became an anthem for perseverance and faith during difficult times. That same year, she won a Grammy Award for Best Soul Gospel Performance, cementing her place among gospel music's finest voices. Over the decades, Myrna recorded more than a dozen albums, led choirs at major gospel conventions, and served as minister of music at Reed Temple AME Church in Maryland, where she inspired generations of singers and musicians. Her style blended traditional gospel with modern rhythms, always keeping her music both fresh and deeply rooted in Scripture. But behind the success and awards, Myrna Summers faced health battles that few outside her inner circle knew about. Friends and colleagues noted that in her later years, she dealt with serious medical challenges that slowed her once tireless pace. Myrna did. Even as her health declined, she continued mentoring younger artists, encouraging choirs and recording music filled with hope and faith. Those who visited her said she remained focused on ministry, counseling singers and musicians who saw her not just as an artist, but as a spiritual leader who had walked the path of faith through both triumph and trial. In 2021, after a career spanning more than 5 decades, Myrna Summers passed away at the age of 72. Tributes poured in from gospel legends, pastors and fans who remembered how her music had lifted them in their darkest hours. Songs like We're Gonna Make It and God Gave Me a Song remain fixtures in church services, carrying forward her message of resilience and trust in God's promises. Myrna Summers left behind more than albums and awards. She left a legacy of perseverance, faith, and ministry through music. She proved that even when illness comes, a voice dedicated to God's work can echo far beyond the limits of time and health, touching hearts long after the singer is gone. Olanda Draper. Olanda Draper, born on September 30th, 1963 in Memphis, Tennessee, was a man whose energy and creativity transformed gospel choir music in the 1980s and 1990s. From the moment he stepped into the world of gospel, it was clear that he carried something special, a vision of music that was bold, electrifying, and unafraid to push boundaries. Raised in the heart of Memphis, Olanda grew up immersed in the rich traditions of gospel music. As a young man, he began directing choirs and quickly earned a reputation for turning every rehearsal into an unforgettable experience. His passion for excellence and innovation would soon propel him onto the national stage. In 1986, he founded Olanda Draper and the Associates, a choir that would become one of the most dynamic and influential groups in contemporary gospel. Known for their tight harmonies, powerful stage presence, and infectious energy, the Associates redefined what a gospel choir could sound like. Their performances were not just concerts. They were spiritual explosions of music and praise that left audiences on their feet and hungry for more. Throughout the 1990s, Olanda Draper and the Associates recorded multiple albums, including Live in the Experience 1994, which produced hits like My Soul Doth Magnify the Lord. The project earned stellar awards and even Grammy nominations, proving that Olanda's vision was resonating far beyond the walls of the church. He worked with gospel legends like Shirley Caesar and the Winans, as well as mainstream artists, blending styles in a way that felt both modern and deeply spiritual. But behind the energy and success, Olanda faced a health battle few knew about. He was diagnosed with kidney failure, a condition that began to take its toll even as his career soared to new heights. Friends later shared how he would sometimes go straight from dialysis treatments to choir rehearsals or recording sessions, refusing to let illness silence the music burning inside him. Olanda Draper did. He continued recording and performing, knowing that his time might be short, but determined to make every note count. On July 21, 1998, at just 34 years old, Olanda Draper passed away suddenly due to kidney failure complications. The gospel world was stunned. His funeral in Memphis drew choirs, artists, and fans from across the country, all coming to honor a man who had reshaped the sound of gospel music in barely over a decade. Even after his passing, Olanda's influence lived on. Many of today's top gospel choirs trace their sound style and inspiration back to his groundbreaking work. He proved that gospel music could be innovative, powerful, and unforgettable, all while staying rooted in faith. Their voices rose above illness, poverty, and pain, shaping the soundtracks of faith for generations. Yet as we celebrate these gospel giants, one question lingers. Do we honor them enough while they live, or only after they're gone? Their stories reveal courage, brilliance, and sacrifice, but also the silence around artists battling disease in private. Should the music industry and faith communities do more to support its legends before the final curtain falls? Share your thoughts below, because the legacy of these icons belongs to all of us.